gentlemen seem not to have touched on is for whose benefit are we being thrifty or spending? Is it for the individual or for the country? If it's for the individual, the obvious answer is be thrifty. Now, I remember when I was out of work for 18 months, I lived on my savings. I saved 10% of my paycheck every paycheck. And for 18 months, that's what I lived on. There was no country coming to me and saying, Andy, here's some money, we'll help you. So I'd like you both to answer the question. Do you want me to be thrifty for the sake of the country, for the individual, and same for you?
I want the country to be thrifty for the sake of you.
Pardon me?
I want the country to be thrifty for the sake of you, the individual. That's what I mean when I say we have to socialize savings and socialize our retirement programs.
Right.
You can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's nothing worth doing by yourself.
I think possibly what you're referring to is this concept of what Keynes and others have called the paradox of thrift. The idea is that what can be a good strategy for the individual, saving and deferred gratification and so forth, can at times, said Keynes, be bad for the society as a whole, and can therefore in the long run end up making everybody poorer. My own view is that's a false idea, but I don't think that there's anything paradoxical about thrift. To begin with, I also think Keynes didn't know what the word meant. And I think he shared that misunderstanding with you, or you shared it with him, because you said the character trait involved was asceticism. That is not,
that's Weber's.
That is not, well, Weber was wrong too. The root of the word thrift is thrive. It means abundance, it means growth, it means productivity. It's not about renunciation, it's not about hating the material world, it's not about an ascetic world. Keynes also used the word hoarding. He said that thrift meant hoarding your money and not spending it. That is not at all what it means. And if people are going to use the word, they must, in my view, have they should use it correctly. If they want to say hoarding, they should say hoarding. Right. If they want to say asceticism, they should say asceticism. But thrift is a different idea. Thrift is the ethic of wise use. It is not about asceticism, hoarding, and saving. Just a little advertisement for the word. But talk a little bit, if you want to, about the paradox of thrift.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get the applause, but
I was playing to the gallery. It's an easy cheer.
Let me state a third position on the paradox of thrift. Yeah. I think it has been something that was a very small piece of Keynes that American journalists, and to a lesser extent economists, I don't think they trumped it quite as much. American journalists love this idea because it's very easy to explain to readers that, private saving is going to be ultimately bad for the economy. They love to say that. You'll find it in journalism all over the place. Yes. But I think this gentleman brings up an interesting point because I think there are two things wrong with this rather vulgar interpretation of the paradox of thrift in this country. One is that Keynes was not really, he has frivolous moments, but he was not really expecting consumers to just have an on-off switch and save the economy, that poor consumers in the Depression, he was not expecting them to go on spending binges. He knew they couldn't do it.
Fourth patriotic.
That was he did that in 1931 when the Depression didn't. It was right before the Austrian bank going down. It looked like things were recovering. You have to contextualize that.
Okay, fair enough.
But in general, his emphasis was on government stimulation because he thought when you really had a deep, deep recession, consumers did not have the capacity to bring the economy out. You had to have government stimulation. Then the consumption would follow as the effect, not the cause. So that's one problem. The other problem I have with the way Americans use the paradox of thrift is, and again, I don't think these are real economists who are doing it, but they haven't factored in a lot of the costs of not saving. So they say, well, if you're saving, you're damaging the economy. But as this gentleman points out, it was actually a pretty good thing. You had a small store of savings to get you by, because there are enormous social costs with people having no savings. And ultimately, you can't just calculate the, this economic cost and say every dollar you save is taking away from the economy. You have to remember that people who don't have the savings are obviously going to need some sort of public assistance, or we hope. If they have medical emergencies, we as a society will pay for it. And if they have zilch for retirement, we are going to have to pay for it in a way that we haven't even imagined today. We're going to have to really increase Social Security. Americans aren't going to like that, but that's what's going to have to happen. So there are enormous social costs. So I really reject this simplistic paradox of thrifting. And one other thing I should say, economically, we have shown in the last few years that there's an economic effect to people having no savings and having excessive borrowing, which is our households cannot jumpstart the economy now because they have been so impoverished by credit. I mean, excessive credit. I think some credit is a great thing, but excessive credit. So they're both economic and social costs that really haven't been factored in by the simplistic journalistic idea.
You're saying that the idea of consumer spending as stimulus now doesn't work because too many people are just tapped out.
Yeah. And the people who have the money are the affluent because of the gross inequality that we've come up with. And the affluent can only spend so much. I mean, we know that. You actually have to have a broad-based economy. Somebody disagrees?
More yachts.
More yachts. Yeah, well, the affluent have actually pulled in. So, I mean, if I can make one other comment. There was a lot of hoopla about how Americans were becoming thrifty again because our household savings rate at one point went up to about 5.5%. Now it's actually a little bit below 4%. It's not great, but there was a lot of hoopla. Most of that aggregate statistic was the affluent pulling back because they had the capacity to pull back. I mean, it's kind of some of the things you talked about. But if you look at the household level for ordinary, middle, and lower income households, they were not able to save more. So the savings, this new thrift everybody talked about, that was just the affluent for the most part.
If I may follow up on the paradox of thrift, it seems to me that we have to talk about the social cost of saving as well as the social cost of no saving. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's something to take very, very seriously, the social cost of no saving. If you have nothing to go on for those 18 months, you're going to be relying on the dole. But here's the problem, it seems to me, with the idea of thrift. No matter how you want to define it, it seems to me that the central pillar of your own idea about thrift is, industry, frugality, and I forget the third.
Stewardship.
Okay, stewardship. But industry, the translation you give in this book, which is a pretty wonderful book, I must say, is hard work. Now, let's grant you that premise. Let's say that thrift involves hard work and it involves frugality, both. Then the question becomes, is there enough work to go around? Is there enough meaningful work to go around? It seems to me that the obvious answer to that question is no. 20% of household incomes in this country right now come from transfer payments. That is to say, from public spending. 20%. 1 out of every $5 that goes into households right now comes from public sources. That is to say, taxes and transfer payments. Okay? Why? Is it because people don't want to work? Or is it because there's not enough jobs? Is it because the jobs have been outsourced? What? Look, if we're going to talk about thrift as being driven by, or animated by, or predicated on hard work, then we're going to have to redefine work. And we're also going to have to redefine the relationship between the production of value through work on one hand, and the receipt of income for work on the other. Because there's not enough work to go around. If there's not enough work to go around, then one of the pillars of thrift, it seems to me, passes away. And I use that phrase advisedly.
The concept of work is one of the pillars of self-sufficiency, is no longer present because we have a 9-point-something% unemployment rate. That's your argument?
No, it has nothing to do with the unfair rate, except that we cannot create jobs enough through the means that we take for granted. In other words, we think that the so-called job creators are the people in the private sector who save their money, invest in businesses. We especially love small businesses. I'll never understand that part. But that's so we worship at the shrine of these so-called job creators. They cannot and they do not create enough jobs for the mere growth of the population. Even if we cut off all immigration, there's not enough work to go around. So what happens then to that pillar of thrift?
I think I heard you say that because there is unemployment, it is higher than you want it to be, therefore we can't talk about the value of thrift.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that private investment will not create enough jobs.
For whatever reason, there isn't enough jobs.
Right, but let's just abstract for a moment from the question of unemployment. What we have is a system where private investment cannot create enough work. We have a system in which 1/5, 20% of all household income comes from public spending, comes from sources we call taxes. That means to me something very, very plain. We need to think about how to redefine work, and we need to think about how to redefine the relationship between the income you receive and the work that you do. Okay? You create value through your work. Some of us do, anyway. Not Shell, because he just pushes paper around. Like me. Some of you actually produce things, of value. That's good. I'm glad for you. But most of us don't. So, look at Wall Street. What did the traders and the CEOs and the brokers and the morons do? Well, they wrecked the economy. They certainly did that really well, right? Is there some intelligible relationship between their effort and their reward? I think not. So that's something that we need to think about. What is the proper or transparent or intelligible relationship between effort and reward? Work and income. It sure is hell not transparent or intelligible if you look at what these guys are earning on Wall Street. They're not doing a damn thing as far as I can tell, and they're making a lot more money than anybody in this room.
Yeah, I agree with you that there's a lot of problems in the products that they make and so forth.
Yes.
I'm not too sure of many things in life, but on the value, on the relationship, on the value of the work ethic as an engine of creativity, personal fulfillment, and social well-being, I just have to say it's not one of those things I feel I need to rethink. I'm just fairly confident. I mean, there's so many things I'm not confident about, but I'm confident.
Yeah.
Now maybe I'm wrong, but I have a high confidence level that a society, you want a society where people, generally speaking, feel that they should make a contribution with their life, and that contribution comes, at least in part, maybe not in the paid labor force, but through an activity, through, what was the term that Marx used? I mean, right through acting in the world to be productive. This seems to me to be not negated by the problem of not enough jobs in the year 2012 in the month of August.
2 sentences? Okay. First, I have nothing against productive labor.
Well, that's really big of you.
I also think, if is it unemployed company, can I use the F word here? Or is that really?
That'd be better.
Okay, I got it. All right. But one of the slogans that I promoted for a couple of years is, use the F word, work. That is to say, enough of it. We can produce more than we can use. Let's stop with this principle of productivity. All right? We can produce way, way more. Our problem is a problem of distribution. Our problem is learning to live with what we have or what we can get. Keynes was really good about this.
There were some big theorists in the 60s that talked a lot about that.
Absolutely. Yep.